Hi, my name is Alex Williams, founder of the New Stack, and you are listening to the New Stack Analyst podcast. Each week, we look at application development and management at scale. SAP is the sponsor for this week's episode of the New Stack Analysts. SAP is committed to Cloud Foundry, an industry-leading open platform as a service for SAP HANA Cloud Platform. You can learn more about SAP HANA Cloud Platform, SAP's commitment to Cloud Foundry, all at sap.com. Now let's get to the show. Hey, it's Alex Williams of the New Stack here for the New Stack Analyst Show with my co-host, Donnie Berkholz. It's been a while, Donnie. How are you?
Doing well. Just had a very nice winter break and getting back in action. How about yourself?
Pretty good. I know you're going to FOSDEM.
Yeah, I'm making kind of a triple whammy out of it. There's a Community Metrics Summit, FOSDEM, and then Config Management Camp up in Ghent.
That's your annual winter trip, isn't it, to that part of the world?
Exactly. A little bit of tech, a little bit of beer, a little bit of mussels and frites. Can't go wrong.
Great. Donnie, we're joined today by Sanjay Patil. Hey, Sanjay, how are you?
Hey, Alex. Yeah, doing good.
Sanjay is with SAP, and he's going to be telling us a little bit about Cloud Foundry in just a minute. But before we get to Sanjay, I'd like to say hello to Stormy Peters of the Cloud Foundry Foundation. Hey, Stormy.
Hey, Alex. Thanks for having us here.
Well, you're welcome. So this is the New Stack Analyst Show, and SAP is a sponsor of the New Stack. And so, Sanjay, I just wanted to give you just a minute to talk about SAP and how it is working with Cloud Foundry. Cloud Foundry is the topic of our conversation today in context with overall platform as a service and developer communities. And so, Sanjay, I'm curious on where you guys are in that journey with platform as a service and Cloud Foundry and how it fits into your overall thinking for SAP.
So we are primarily in the application space, along with focus on various different technologies in the domains such as mobility, database and technologies, analytics, and just about any other technology. But I would still qualify ourselves as primarily a largest business application provider with the whole gamut of associated technologies. And there is a lot of interesting facts about SAP, like how much of world's food, shoes, and different things that flow through SAP systems. Pretty mind-boggling fact. I could share that with you offline. But there's a lot of worldwide transactions that touch SAP system. Consumers might not be aware of it oftentimes, but just about anything that we use on a day-to-day basis touches SAP system somewhere or other. What we see at our customers is, in addition to using SAP applications and any other system as what I would call as a stable core, we see a lot of requirements in the layer where innovation must happen. In the sense, the current dynamics in the market with the changing business requirements just about mandates that enterprises cannot just deploy some applications and systems and be comfortable that they would continue to meet their requirements on an ongoing basis. So there is a need for continuous innovation. I think that's fairly well understood. And at the same time, in the marketplace, particularly in the technologies, there is so much innovation happening in terms of programming languages, frameworks, components with a lot of rich functionality that is available at the disposal of developers. The way developers can build applications today is changing pretty rapidly. So there is this mix of need for continuous innovation and a lot of choices available at the same time. What it means for enterprises is still, how do we tap into all this potential of all these new technologies and have an environment, kind of a platform that supports leveraging all these innovations in a more meaningful, somewhat predictable manner. So essentially, we're looking for a platform for continuous innovation, that would include continuous development, deployment, maintenance. And SAP has been building a platform called SAP HANA Cloud Platform, HCP, which essentially serves that purpose, a platform for application as a service. And that is squarely where we see Cloud Foundry as the underlying technology. So in short, Cloud Foundry provides the technical underpinning for SAP's platform as a service offering called SAP HANA Cloud Platform.
Okay, great. One of the questions I have is, how does SAP fit Cloud Foundry into the HANA platform, and what are some of those use cases there? And I'm curious, is the goal here to make HCP, the HANA Cloud Platform, more like a PaaS?
Interesting. Yeah. I would even say that SAP HANA Cloud Platform is PaaS plus additional services that SAP as a business application company includes in the PaaS offerings. So is HANA Cloud Platform a PaaS? Yes, it is. Is it a better PaaS? I would say yes, it is, for various different reasons, but obviously my opinion would be biased. I work for SAP. Where we use HCP is primarily in three scenarios. One is, as I alluded to earlier, most of our customers do need an innovation platform to extend the stable core with new additional requirements. That's scenario one. Secondly, oftentimes the existing applications need to integrate with other applications running, on-premise, in the cloud, applications from SAP or from just about anywhere else. So as an integration platform. And thirdly, just to build brand new innovative applications on a platform. And as I mentioned earlier, if you look at developers' challenges or opportunities today, they have a lot of different choices for programming languages, modules, and things. So I think the responsibility or the what a good platform should provide is to enable developers to focus directly on what they want to do, which is application development, with the platform taking care of assembling the needed runtimes, application services, and helping in deployment, scaling the application, making sure that the system of the application, the health of the system is monitored properly, any resulting logs that the application emits to be captured properly and presented in a meaningful way. So all these are platform functions, and that's what HCP does, and Cloud Foundry becomes a very important technology in that regard. For example, if I, as an application developer, I want to code application in JavaScript, and I want to use a few application services, MongoDB, Redis, what have you, and I want to deploy it with certain scaling requirements that I have in mind. If I were to take the traditional route, I have to figure out, okay, what version of JavaScript language do I use? Which runtime should be running my code? Where is my MongoDB deployed? What version of that I'm using? And in order to scale, what exactly I need to do? All of these details, instead of a developer thinking about it or working with the architect of the deployment platform, Cloud Foundry lets you simply specify all of that in a simple manifest kind of manner, and takes care of all the underlying details of packaging your application along with the needed runtime services, deploying it, scaling it, and maintaining the health of the system. That's where we see Cloud Foundry providing the technical underpinning to make a PaaS a much more efficient PaaS.
So, Stormy, what is this innovation platform? And it's a term we hear a lot, and what does that mean for the developers you're talking to? I mean, how are they trying to be more innovative? Are they trying, what are some of those themes that you're hearing when they're saying we want to be innovative or we want to modernize? Is it continuous delivery, or is it other things? What does that mean?
Well, I agree with Sanjay that they're looking for a platform that takes care of everything for them. So they want to focus on their application and the problem they're trying to solve. And then they're looking for the platform to deploy it, scale it, monitor it, let them know if something goes wrong. As far as what they're innovating on, it's all over. So the Cloud Foundry Foundation, we have over 50 member companies. And what I think is really, really stands out is that we have a number of providers, a handful of providers, but we also have a whole lot of user companies that have joined us. And those user companies are across the board. They're like the industrial internet with GE, Internet of Things, they're, telecoms, any industry you can think of is has to move its applications to the cloud and is looking for a platform that gives it not only all the tools it needs, but also the portability to not feel locked in and to be able to move from one vendor to the other so that they can move to the one that's best for them.
So Donnie, I mean, my question here is, there are all these member companies, in the Cloud Foundry Foundation, and there's some core areas of, that you see companies developing in. There's the new cloud apps, there's those on-premise apps, and then there's more like these cloud extensions that you see, to cloud solutions. I'm borrowing from a post that Holger Mueller wrote, on this topic. I'm just, this to me is where you start to see the delineation in the developer communities. I mean, the born on the internet kind of, companies that are developing apps, that seems much different than what you would see out of Cloud Foundry, or am I wrong there?
The way I've seen the messaging that's been coming out of Cloud Foundry at Pivotal and the foundation is trying to bring all the enterprises up to speed so that they can be like the born on the internet companies, right? All the stuff about, cloud native, about, microservices, and saying, hey, you don't have to build this up yourself from scratch. You don't have to use Docker and Kubernetes or Mesos or what have you. We'll give you the platform and all you have to do is write an app on top. And that's, a message that I think resonates a lot, because a lot of these banks and insurance companies and, manufacturers and whatever else, they're all out there saying, well, we don't want to, Home Depot doesn't want to compete with Lowe's anymore. They want to compete with some new startup that's going to come disrupt the whole business. And so they have to be able to move at the speed of the startups and not just the speed of, the other tool stores around the area, right? I mean, you look at almost every industry right now, and there's either some kind of disruptive startup already there or one that's emerging right now. I mean, it's the classic examples that you hear at almost every conference you go to are, you've got Uber and Airbnb and Tesla and those sorts of things. Twilio, if you're thinking about telco. But, there's other, I guess, less interesting industries doing it too, right? I mean, a great example is Zenefits. All these health insurance companies are freaking out about Zenefits because it's totally screwing with their entire business model.
Yeah, yeah.
And so are all the HR software companies too, for that matter, because they say, oh, we'll give you the payments and the salary and everything for free because we're making our money off of insurance commission.
So Sanjay, does that apply to you guys? I mean, your traditional competitors have been like the Oracles of the world. It seems different now for you guys. I mean, there's, you guys have, for instance, alliances in the IoT space, with, organizations like Siemens, right? And there's other alliances out there with GE, for example. And Cloud Foundry is kind of serving as this kind of underlying layer. Is how do you guys map out the competitive market, when you're thinking about building out these developer, communities for these different kind of market focus?
Right. So I guess the industries that, Donnie just referenced and Stormy also mentioned, SAP plays in all those industries, and a lot more, whether it's manufacturing, financials, retail, chemical, what have we. SAP has pretty solid applications in all these areas. And, as was pointed out, although we talk most commonly about the Airbnbs, but similar phenomenons are happening in pretty much every industry, every sector. Given that there is a need for continuous innovation in all these areas, sorry for using that term repeatedly, but that always comes to my mind, that is the current reality in all these industries. IoT points out some scenarios more than others, for example, given that IoT is receiving a lot of spotlight in many cases. But to me, it's not an exception. IoT is no longer not any exception for a place where a lot more innovation is happening. The way we see this, for example, in the case of Siemens that you mentioned, Siemens is building an industry cloud for their customers to utilize the massive amount of data that Siemens machinery and equipment generates, and IoT applications can be built on top of that. So you can look at Siemens itself building an ecosystem of their customers, and they need a platform that would help them empower their customers to build more powerful applications. SAP is helping Siemens to build that industry cloud for Siemens. We can see similar things happening in other spaces as well.
So Storben, who are these, who are these developers you're seeing emerge, from the more traditional enterprise? I mean, I know it's kind of an amorphous question, but I'm trying to get a profile on the people who you're encountering. Who are you seeing out there? What are the use cases that they're building out? There's other developer communities out there where where they maybe not as enterprise oriented, but maybe they are more oriented towards building out internet applications. And I'm sure the community that that I'm asking about does that too. But I expect you're starting to see some delineation. I'm curious, how you're seeing this profile emerge.
Yeah, so I was tempted to answer your question with like actual names of people when you said, who are they? I'm like, oh, they're Harry, Dick, and Joe.
Yeah.
But as to who we're seeing, so I just gave a talk at Scale that was like a learn about Cloud Foundry, and literally the whole room was new to Cloud Foundry, and most of them were enterprise developers of some, I don't know exactly the size of all their companies, but they worked at a company and they were trying to bring Cloud Foundry in or were interested in exploring that. I think one of the examples I could give is we've started these, we call them SIGs, which I know is an overused term, special interest groups, but we're creating them for different verticals so that we can make sure that user requirements from the different industries get fed back into the platform. And the first one that we did last year was in the financial industry. We went to New York, we're in Wall Street. Just as an aside, if you go to Wall Street, you should wear a blue button-up shirt. Nobody told me that. So I was the only one not wearing a blue button-up shirt. It was a really interesting day. So we spent a day with a lot of CTOs from some very large banks and financial institutions, and they were really willing to, like, all of them were trying Cloud Foundry. So all of them at some level were trying it within their enterprise, within their bank. Not all of them had deployed anything. Some of them had gotten to the production stage, most of them hadn't, but they were really willing to share with each other like what they had tried and what was working and what wasn't working. I've never seen that type of collaboration between companies like that in a room. And then they talked about what requirements did they have for Cloud Foundry that might be different than other industries. Like, for example, they have a much greater need to set roles. So like a person that starts a service is not the same person that can stop it. So things like that. And there were, we covered a couple whiteboards with requirements and triage them and set priorities. So I don't know if that tells you who these developers are, but it's one group that we worked with. So I think they're all over all industries and all sorts of applications.
So Donnie, you've studied the developer communities pretty extensively over the years, and I'm curious on what you're seeing is, what are some of the themes you're seeing in the evolution of who is, this enterprise developer, and if it really is much different than maybe a year ago, or are we starting to see more advancements in how they're using applications?
I mean, I don't think who they are is changing, but I think, across the industry, we're always throwing around sort of buzzwords and buzz phrases like digital transformation. What's really underlying that? It's things like DevOps. And, if you look across the thing I was talking about before, which was all these sort of startups as ankle biters in all these different industries, what that means is that everybody, including the technology, always has to move faster than they used to.
Right.
And so, this increase in agility is really what's driving the change in processes, the change in technologies, so that you can focus on building the stuff that matters to the business and doing so more quickly.
Right.
And so, what does that mean for enterprise developers? It means that they're forced to learn new technologies a lot more often than they used to. And in many cases, that'll be coming down as a top-down dictate, where somebody up there at a VP level or whatever says, all right, the new plan here is everybody's got to learn Node. All of our new backends are going to be written in Node. And so you have to go to the next Node conference and learn Node. Because, I think enterprise developers, it's not just one term. There's not just like one person who represents an enterprise developer. There are lots of different groups. And, without over-segmenting, one way to think about it is on sort of a spectrum of how outward-looking versus inward-facing they are. Are they out there learning new technologies, paying attention to what's happening in the industry, or are they inward-facing, showing up 9 to 5, building the same thing that they've been building for the past 15 years? And it's the outward-facing ones you don't really need to worry about as much. They're going to keep learning the new stuff. It's the inward-facing ones that are having to change the way they work, to learn new technologies, new frameworks, new languages on a more regular basis, so that they can keep up with the rate of change that's happening right now.
So new languages, new frameworks, in the pace of the market that that we're a part of and that we follow, we hear terms and you really wonder whether they're relevant or not. I mean, I think you brought this up, Donnie, at the HPE event in London, where you asked people about microservices, for example. What you're talking about essentially are kind of, fit a context for microservices. Is that a relevant topic for people, or is it more nuanced and not necessarily microservices, though it might be actually what they're trying to do?
Yeah, I hate to get too bound up in semantics about it, even though I'm an analyst and that's supposedly a big part of our job.
But this is our show. We can get
But I mean, that said, it's not really important whether it suits somebody else's definition of a microservice. You can architect it whatever size works for you. I mean, I just did an interview with a journalist yesterday, and the whole interview was about what does it take to do microservices? Because you can't just say like, oh, well, we're doing waterfall style development, building big monoliths today. We're shifting over to microservices tomorrow. Like that doesn't work, right? You've got to build all the human processes, all the technologies. You got to be able to do things like continuous delivery, have all your servers automated before you can even think about doing microservices, because you're not going to get any of the benefits out of it. So what's the point? And besides that, there's a really nice kind of not a data-driven graph, but just a conceptual graph that came out of Martin Fowler at ThoughtWorks on the benefits of microservices versus monoliths,
right? And
basically showing you that it's a lot higher barrier up front, and you don't really get to the benefits of that until you start scaling the infrastructure and scaling the teams to a certain point, because you're not running into all these different kinds of communication barriers and process barriers before you've gotten to, let's say 50 or 75 developers trying to deploy very complex and large applications.
Now let's take a quick break before we get back to the second half of the show. SAP is the sponsor for this week's episode of the New Stack Analysts. SAP is committed to Cloud Foundry, an industry-leading open platform as a service for SAP HANA Cloud Platform. You can learn more about SAP HANA Cloud Platform, SAP's commitment to Cloud Foundry, all at sap.com. Now let's get back to the show. Sanjay, how is this new pace affecting SAP? And how is this proving out with HANA Cloud Platform, its integration with Cloud Foundry?
I would say it's playing out, really well. We could even look at some of the examples. I don't know if you heard of Hybris as a service, one of the offerings of SAP, basically e-commerce on demand. And we have been building that application ground up using the cloud native application architecture, microservices as the basis for it. So, and it's doing pretty well in terms of seeing the benefits that Donnie was mentioning. And yeah, I would agree that it's not simply, adopting a new architectural style. It does involve different human processes. Like, for example, if you are a developer of a microservice, you're actually in charge of that service. And that being in charge means taking ownership of not just the code and the algorithm, but how it runs, how it scales. If, for example, in the continuous deployment model, you don't have any longer a systems engineer who would take care of running and scaling your system, right? You depend upon the platform. If an application fails and it's pointed out that it's a certain microservice that's failing, it might be the engineer who is in charge of the microservice that has to step forward and look into what's going on there. So the profile of the people is somewhat different. They're continuously learning, taking more ownership, and we see this panning out pretty well in the example of Hybris as a service in our case, and what other customers and partners are doing with our HANA Cloud Platform, which supports a platform for developing microservices and composing them into higher level business services and applications.
So what are the line of business apps that are being, in SAP that are most directly affected here? Are they all of them? I mean, are there some in particular that you would cite, products that are being built on HCP with that Cloud Foundry environment as part of it?
It's not all of them yet. Certainly not. The front runner here is the e-commerce on demand, hybrid as a service. We call it as YaaS. And there are some adjacent applications in that area, primarily related to focused on serving customer on demand group of applications. And we are seeing slowly other areas warming up to this notion, but as of today, it's not, all the applications that are running on HCP or have adopted this new model.
So Stormy, what's the direction now for Cloud Foundry in 2016 as it specifically relates to member companies like SAP? Are there some themes that you guys are thinking about? And I think again about what Donnie's talking about in terms of this pace, this super fast pace that we're starting to see. This continual learning. Actually, I was at Node Interactive, and Brian Cantrell of Join said it's a time of almost peak confusion. We're not quite at peak confusion yet, but we're almost there. And I'm just curious, like in this kind of like this, almost like this state of, it's not chaos, but it's like this. I mean, there's just so many different things going on right now in the market, and there's so many things just to keep track of. For the experts alone. How are you guys defining your direction? And what should we be looking for from Cloud Foundry this year in that context?
Yeah, it is definitely going fast. So we just had our 1-year anniversary of the Cloud Foundry Foundation this month. So
congratulations.
Yeah, in this past year, we formed the foundation. We had over 50 member companies join, and we had 3 summits worldwide, and we ended the year with a certification launch. So you can now get Cloud Foundry certified for many of our provider companies. So I think the challenge in the next year, it's going to be exciting and challenging, but it's like, can we continue the velocity of the development that we've seen? Like, can we continue to build this next generation of container orchestration? And can we scale the foundation itself to meet the demand of our users and member base?
Okay, so just if I might interrupt quickly. Tell us about that pace in 2015 and keeping up that pace, and so we can have some context for 2016.
Yeah, so I don't work on the code base itself, so I can't tell you what it's like to be there, but I can tell you that we've scaled the number of companies and developers involved in developing that code tremendously. So what Cloud Foundry started, it was, when we started the foundation, it was primarily a pivotal project, and now we have many of these companies have developers working on it. They also have set up dojos where they train new users, all the programming done on Cloud Foundries in pairs. So we've really incorporated other companies into this process, and we now have, I don't know the exact number, but 150 developers working on these technologies. And there's still a lot left to be done. So like, you look at the Internet of Things, which is what I'm working on now. It's not, it's the new way of the world, and your fridge is going to talk to you, but it's also changing network protocols. It's changing the way apps work. So like on the network side, these are no longer HTTP things because they're too small, and they need to, they need more energy. They need to last longer. So we're looking at changing the protocols of things like TCP and UDP, and we have partners like GE and others that are building that into Cloud Foundry. And then on the app side, it's like the app, instead of the web server holding all the state, now the endpoints themselves, these Internet of Things devices, have the state, and so they need to communicate back with the server with their data. So we're seeing a lot of changes not only on the technical side, but also on how, I'm looking for the word for this app thing, on how things work in the world, like the way we think about them and the way we think about them communicating together. So we'll continue to see changes like that. Like, I think we'll see Internet of Things. We're working on that. I think we'll see a couple other changes at that level, kind of like the changes from monolithic to microservices.
So, Donnie, how do you compare Cloud Foundry to other platform as a service? There's actually there's a number of platform as a service providers within the Cloud Foundry Foundation. First of all, there's you start seeing platforms that are much more unopinionated out of things like from Engineer Art, OpenDAS. you see other platform as a services out there, such as OpenShift. Then you also see, platforms from companies like Apprenda. How do you view the landscape, out there, and where does Cloud Foundry fit?
Yeah, good question. I think there's a lot of different variables involved when you're trying to compare different platform as a service options. I mean, I think one of the most important things, and one that's certainly on my mind this week, is you've got the community side of it. When you're comparing these different options, you have to think, all right, one, what kind of community is it? Is it a corporate-driven community? Is it an individual-driven community? When they say something like ecosystem, what are they referring to? How many of those developers working on the platform come from a single vendor versus from a broad set of other vendors in a partnership, like the Hadoop ecosystem, for example, or from individuals at end user companies. So I think the community aspect is a really important one. Another piece that I think about when I'm comparing platforms is along the lines of what you mentioned. What level of opinion do they bring? Because there's a very broad spectrum in terms of the kinds of applications people are trying to build internally, and how much flexibility they feel like they want, how much they're actually able to cope with, and what they can get done with that in a reasonable amount of time. I mean, it's a lot like the difference between monolith and microservices, in that you've got to pick up something that gives you the right level of flexibility without going too far overboard and getting lost in architecture astronaut. And so, you think about, what does that spectrum look like? Well, you've got things like, raw containers on one side, moving to things like container orchestration and management. Somewhere along the line, you start getting into, let's say, kind of IaaS options somewhere in there. And then toward the far other side of the spectrum, you've got really high level sort of PaaS from SaaS options, right? And then PaaS would be somewhere in between there, the typical PaaS we think of when we're talking about Cloud Foundry, OpenShift, that sort of thing. And so, and on the far end, like I said, we've got things like Force.com, right?
Right?
You're doing like visual programming. Your options are very limited. It's a very highly opinionated platform with a small set of use cases that they're trying to target. And so, depending on what companies are trying to do, and how much of that DIY mindset they've got and how much of that flexibility they need, they end up somewhere on that spectrum.
So Sanjay, this brings up some interesting questions for me. So what is that flexibility that you want to offer your community out there? Cloud Foundry, does have an opinionated, aspect to it. What is it that you think that, your customers need and you need to think about, differentiating across other platforms as a service environments as well, to be able to fit kind of perhaps, a different kind of developer customer.
Right. So I think there are two ways I would think about this question. One is, the flexibility a business would need to deploy an application and scale it, manage it, have the option to expand into other markets. Like, for example, I as a business currently, for example, I'm targeting North American market, and later I decide to go into Asian or European market. And what I have built is a pretty heavy application. And, there are local jurisdictional requirements that would kind of limit my choices of where I deploy the application. By having a standardized platform like Cloud Foundry, and then I can rely upon local partners who offer cloud in those areas for me as an application, as a customer, as a business, to take my application and deploy in those markets. So I would expect Cloud Foundry to provide that standardized platform worldwide in all industries, all geographies, so that businesses then have a lot more flexibility from pure business perspective to enter into new markets. And also expect that there are communities of developers available in that market to further expand upon those applications. So that's one area. Secondly, as was pointed out, by several of us, there are new things emerging in the technological landscape pretty much every day. Now, as an application developer, I may be tempted to use these new services, but as a business, at the same time, I want to be confident that these new services that are coming in, they can be safely used. They do meet the quality requirements that my business requires. So what that means is there has to be some way of standardizing, certifying almost, to say that as far as Cloud Foundry-based applications are concerned, these services and extensions from the Cloud Foundry ecosystem would work readily. So what that gives is an ultimate flexibility for a business to say, hey, developers, you can pick what you like, as long as it is, within this ecosystem certified. Businesses can safely allow them to expand. So that's suddenly, provides a whole new pace of innovation for the developer community. So I think those two flexibilities, one at the business level to be able to reach to other markets. Secondly, from the development perspective, allow them to innovate and use additional things without worrying about the standards and qualities. I think those are the two flexibilities that Cloud Foundry provides, and I would hope to see more of that happening in 2016 and going forward.
So I'm curious then, in context with that, you guys have done a pretty good job with SAP OpenUI 5. There's a community that's been developing on GitHub out of that. I'm curious of that to me is like an example of a much more of a capability that SAP Net didn't necessarily have 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
What does that say about your own about SAP right now, and kind of in context with this fast pace and this balance of opinionated and unopinionated systems? And are there other projects like that we should be seeing from SAP in the months ahead?
Yeah, great question, Alex. And I have been working at SAP for I would say sufficient amount of time to having witnessed this change within SAP. There has been a lot more adoption and recognition of open source playing a critical strategic role at all levels, top management to the development teams. We started SAP started using open source in the area or the layer in the architecture where it makes most sense for our customers. What I mean by that is, as I hinted at the beginning, there is a tremendous amount of application functionality and data worldwide that is held in SAP systems. So one of the low-hanging fruits are the ways we can enable developer communities and customers out there to use all this innovation is to help them consume the data and functionality residing in applications, SAP applications. So some of our early open source projects are squarely in that area. Apache Olingo is a great example, which is an open source implementation of OData, which is a standard to ubiquitously consume application data and functionality. OpenUI 5, as you just pointed out, is an open source project which is a very rich library of JavaScript-based UI components. We have another open source project that was announced just last year called Build, which is a collaborative design tool that meets the need of a designer who typically is at the crossroads of multiple interactions in a company. A designer has to talk to customers, application developers, LOB people, and a designer becomes extremely crucial, having playing this pivotal role. And we are finding less and less such people at our customers and partners. So what we did is we developed a collaborative design tool, which essentially plays the role of a great designer, and we're offering that as an open source project. So with Apache Olingo, OpenUI 5, and Build, we are doing a lot of useful things in the consumption layer. Now, if you go deeper at the application platform level, is where Cloud Foundry plays a pretty critical role. And there are also some other projects going on in that area in other places that we are keeping a close eye on. So overall, I think there are a lot of great things happening at SAP in terms of open source and open technologies in general. And just to sum up, we have a lot more projects in the consumption layer, and slowly we are contributing a lot more in the application platform level.
So Stormy, that to me speaks to the maturity of the ecosystem, right? And the way that SAP is viewing it, right? Which then makes me think of what I was asking Donnie, and I think it relates kind of the Cloud Foundry discussion. It's like, how do you adapt the platform over time, with your member community if they are getting more sophisticated? There may not always be the need just for a deeply opinionated environment, or maybe that's just the way to go. And just help people just focus on differentiating the application, right? And not worry about the load balancer or whatever it is, there's different kind of aspects of what goes into actually application development. Those decisions that are made, by people who are looking to fine tune the infrastructure, application infrastructure itself. As people get more, as they understand more, as they learn more, how does Cloud Foundry, adapt? And do you make it the platform less opinionated, or what are some of the things that you need to think about?
So the platform will continue to adapt, and it's open source software, and anyone can come work on it and help be part of that process. There's obviously project leads for each of the areas. It will continue to be opinionated. So app developers don't want to have to worry about the load balancer, right? They want it to work. They want to know that smart minds are making it smart. Load balancing focused minds are making it the best load balancer ever. So I don't think app developers will need to focus more on the infrastructure. They're going to focus more on their app, and technology is increasingly complicated in all areas, so that they'll still have plenty to learn in that space. I do think there's some needs for some of the things that we're looking at 2016 is like, how do you create a global marketplace for these app developers that's, as Sanjay said, portable, but also like where they can advertise what they're doing. How do you create and define what an expert Cloud Foundry user is? Like, can we offer a certification process that helps these companies hire Cloud Foundry experts to help them with their infrastructure? So I think there's technology needs, and then there's also the foundation also focuses on the infrastructure, ecosystem type needs as well.
Donnie, any last thoughts or questions before we finish up today?
Yeah, I guess to follow up on what Stormy was saying about that, I think what we've seen happening in technology is an inevitable move farther and farther up the stack. And, I think where that'll end up going with this is something along the lines of what's happening in Cloud Foundry right now, which is more and more fragmentation targeted toward use cases, which is the next move up the stack for these things. So you might see a lot more of these sort of Cloud Foundry variants that are focused on very specific use cases to let people build the minimal possible code on top, because they've already gotten 37 different build packs that are just ready to go for things like Sanjay was talking about earlier, right? Like the Siemens cloud. I mean, it doesn't get a lot more focused than things like that. And you could imagine those across, 27 different kinds of, vertical and horizontal use cases. And so, we're going to end up in the same place, though, that we are now with things like JavaScript frameworks, which is there's going to be a lot of fragmentation. There's going to be a lot of new choices emerging constantly. And people are not going to have a lot of time to get up to speed with that. And so, it's going to be really important to focus on things like keeping that barrier to entry as low as possible so that people don't get so confused about all the choices that are going to be out there.
Sanjay, any last thoughts?
Yeah, so I think focusing on ecosystem to make sure that some of the fog of war that exists with all these options gets cleared up. That's one of the important work that's happening at Cloud Foundry, and SAP is part of that. And providing all the choices to the developers, but without having so much of confusion. That's an important area.
And Stormy, any last concluding thoughts from you about where we are in this kind of discussion on Cloud Foundry?
So I think it's a really exciting time. It's a lot of enterprises are making this shift from monolithic to microservices. And we're happy that there's a large number of providers and users that want to be part of defining how we can best do that for all industries and all users in an opinionated fashion, but hopefully one that gives them enough choices.
Well, Stormy, thank you. Sanjay, thank you very much, and appreciate SAP support. We look forward to following Cloud Foundry, your progress with Cloud Foundry in the year ahead, and with HANA Cloud Platform and all the interesting things that are happening in the IoT space. And Donnie, is great to have you back on the show as the co-host, and look forward to several more shows this year with you. So thanks, everyone. This is the New Stack Analyst Show. We'll be back soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks.
That's it for this week's show. Thank you very much for joining us. I'd like to thank our sponsor. SAP is the sponsor for this week's episode of the New Stack Analysts. SAP is committed to Cloud Foundry, an industry-leading open platform as a service for SAP HANA Cloud Platform. You can learn more about SAP HANA Cloud Platform, SAP's commitment to Cloud Foundry, all at sap.com. Audio editing and sound design for the new Stack Analyst podcast is provided by Broken Hours. You can find them at brokenhours.com. Thanks again, and hope to see you back at the show. Bye-bye.